Good evening to Open Your Mind Internet Radio. You have myself, Alan James.
And myself, Stephen George, with no echo.
With no echo. Good evening. It's Sunday the 13th of March. How are you all doing out there? Yeah, very quiet.
They're not going to be shouting back at you. We can't hear them.
Yeah, no.
Well, if we can't hear you, log on to the chat box and let us know how you're doing.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Good stuff. So let's go through our normal communication channels and we'll take it from there.
Hang on a second. Show 36.
Yeah,
and
I know.
And they said it wouldn't last.
I know. There you
anyway.
Go. Last longer than Michael Jackson's marriage. I tell you that.
Oh, that's I'm not saying
brilliant.
Yeah. Okay.
And I did see a saying on Facebook earlier today, and if you're the saying is something like, if you're a true friend, you wouldn't want your friends to be ignorant, because a true friend wouldn't let you be ignorant. So, you know, if you think about that, if you have friends and you're a true friend, try and educate your friends about what's going on, because they need to know about it. Okay, so without further ado, we're going to bring in our guest. Our guest is a chap called Thomas Sheridan. He's born and bred an Irishman, and he's just wrote a book. It's published out at the moment. It's called Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopaths, which sounds very interesting, and I know we're going to have a great conversation about it. Thomas, good evening to you.
Man.
Sorry, Thomas, we just had your volume there again. Come back into us there. How are you doing?
Hi, guys.
Hi, Thomas.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh, you're welcome.
No problem at all, Thomas. What we do, Thomas, is basically when the guest comes on, give us a bit of background about, you know, how you got into this and how you got involved, and so people know exactly where you're coming from and how you managed to write the book and how you got your information. Give us a kind of a bit of a guide there.
Well, sure. It's been very much a lifelong process. I grew up in the Ballymun Flats on the north side of Dublin, and you know, this is back in the late 70s, early 80s, and it was a tough area at the time. But I used to always find that the people I was most afraid of were the school teachers at school. There was certain one or two school teachers in the school, and even as a young kid, I couldn't understand their how sadistic they could be, especially towards younger children. And they always seemed to pick on the weakest kids and not the hard and tough ones. And then, like, I got older and I started playing music, and you know, I went through my life. And in the mid '80s, with a couple of $100 in my pocket and a one-way ticket, I ended up in New York. I was about 19 or 20, and one thing led to another, and I got into playing in bands in the music industry there, and it was pretty fantastic for a good long while. And you know, it was like being absorbed within New York culture down the Lower East Side and that whole scene. And you did meet people who were kind of strange, and again, they reminded me of these people I knew growing up. But you know, I just assumed because they were artists or in the music business, they were just a bit odd, and that was just the nature of the beast. I then studied in graphic design, and then went to work for several Wall Street investment firms, and this became an enormous personal education for me. I was working at a very famous Wall Street firm, whose letters, well, by the name is GNS, is their initials. And there was a guy I was working with there, and he kind of, I couldn't understand him. He was tall, he was quite good looking, but he had like kind of dead eyes, and I used to work with him a lot, and I found him very frightening, intimidating. And then one day we started talking, and he realised I played guitar, and we kind of, I wouldn't say bonded, but he kind of clicked with me, and he kind of came friendly with me in the office, and we became kind of friends through that. And one day, quite out of the blue, during a lunch break, he says to me, "You know, Thomas, I'm a psychopath." And I just laughed and said, "Well, you chop people up?" And he goes, "No, I'm actually clinically diagnosed as a psychopath." And I said, "Well, what do you mean by you're a psychopath?" And he told me this whole long story about when he was 19. You know, he'd always had trouble as a teenager. He came from a very wealthy family in Manhattan. He stole his father's sports car, and he drove up to Boston. He blew his parents' credit cards, and his family were driven mad by him. So they sent him to see a psychiatrist, and they did a full diagnostic test on him. And he was he scored at the top end of the range of the psychopathy test. And yet somehow he ended up on Wall Street. It turned out later his uncle was a big shot in the company, so that's how he ended up working in investment banking there. And so that this was just too much of an opportunity for me to pass down. So I was always kind of interested in like these kind of strange people anyway. So I asked him, can you tell me if there's any other people in this building or in this apartment who are also psychopaths? And he said, sure. And then he started explaining to me that psychopaths have an instinctual radar. It's similar to what gay people have. When a gay person go anywhere in the world and they can spot a gay person across the street, it's just like an instinctual, thing they have. Psychopaths have the same thing. And funny enough, the people that he pointed out were the people in the building that I knew there was something not right about them. And then I started to think about them, and they all had specific traits that were very, very similar, regardless if they were male or female, or their race or ethnic background or anything, or even the capacity in the company they worked in. And then I just became absolutely fascinated with psychopaths and psychopathy from that point on. And I've literally read and devoured every book on the subject. I've met lots of people who've had relationships with psychopaths, and then it's just a hobby. I kept it to myself, and then back in September I just said to myself, I should share this information. So I started making YouTube videos, and then people start watching them and telling me, that's spot on, this is what my ex-husband was like, this is what my ex-girlfriend was like. And this publisher, she had seen my video, one of my videos, and we started talking, and one thing led to another, and they published my book, Puzzling People. And it was just basically, I'd read an awful lot of information, and some of it very, very technical information, right? Because I'm that kind of person. When I get interested in something, I completely absorb myself in it. Yeah. And the more I read it, the more I realized that so many problems in people's lives, from their relationships to especially the workplace bullying and things like that, and abusive bosses, and all the way up to government. The problem with psychopaths were these psychopathic individuals, these individuals who they have no remorse, they have no conscience, they don't care about anyone but themselves, but they're very, very good at hiding it. And they have this thing called the mask of sanity. And a psychopath is actually far more dangerous than someone that has schizophrenia or probably any other mental health disorder, for the simple reason is that they hide it, and you don't know what they're going to do to you. And most people, when they hear the term psychopath, they think, oh, it's Ted Bundy, a fellow who chops up women, and the Yorkshire Ripper. Yes, those guys are psychopaths. Some psychopaths are serial killers, but the vast, overwhelming majority of psychopaths are perfectly socialized within society. They're everything from, a street sweeper to an unemployed guy, all the way up to a president of the United States or many other countries, and every other thing in between. According to current mental health studies, 1 in every 25 people in Western society, in some places like the United States is 1 in 22. The NHS in Britain says 1 in 30. But of 1 in 25 people globally, on average, is a psychopath. So that means if you know 25 people, in your life you've met a psychopath. You may have not known they were a psychopath. It may have been the husband who walked out on you as if you didn't exist after, and like leaving the wife and the kids to fend for themselves. It could have been this guy at work who tormented you, a workplace bully who was incredibly sadistic. It could have been in my very first exposure to the pathology, sadistic school teachers who love nothing more than torturing children who can't, psychologically that is, and sometimes physically, who cannot defend themselves in order to gain a power rush. And I thought this was tremendous information, and I thought it was very good from a healing point of view. And yet, so few people knew about it. So, sitting down with my publisher, and we spoke about this. We decided to put out a book in layman's terms that would take the science and, to show you where the science is coming from. That this is very well backed up. Like all the field of psychology, this is all very